Hello, everybody. I am Drew Duncan. Do not forget that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. You can find me on YouTube and Patreon by looking for Drew Duncan Radio. And do not forget that I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. Simply tell your device to play Drew Duncan on Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Deezer, Spreaker, CastBox. I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. The XFL ratings are in for Week One, which saw the opening game, which was the DC Defenders and Seattle Dragons, see a TV viewership of around 3.3 million viewers, which was compared to the Alliance of American Football. Its first game drew 2.9 million viewers. Oh, and by the way, when the initial XFL opened up, its viewership was somewhere in the neighborhood of 54 million viewers. And then, of course, after that, for both of these brands initially, with the AAF and the old XFL, we were talking about a serious plummet. And when all was said and done, the initial XFL set records for actually having the least amount of viewers during prime time. But the XFL took a slightly different tack. They started games at 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had football games on a Saturday afternoon and a Sunday kind of mid-afternoon scenario. And when we look at the ratings from the NFL in Week 1 this past season, I think it was a 5% increase around the board, except for CBS, 17.9 million viewers. So when we're looking at the XFL and the NFL and the constant comparison, there is a significant gap. But here's the thing, though. You could look at this two ways, because you could almost say that the XFL is not branded. We don't know who the XFL is yet. And watching this version of the XFL, to me, is completely different than watching the old version of the XFL, at least the way that it was billed. I think the talent gap is completely different. I think schematically it's completely different. You've got different names, Jim Zorn, Bob Stoops, June Johnson, that are all involved in this. But then again, the AAF had Mike Singletary and a host of others that were involved in it as well. But what is Oliver Luck doing that is any different from what the AAF was trying to accomplish? And then, of course, the other way that you could look at it is the XFL is branded. And so because of that lingering image, and people from my generation that saw the initial XFL, right, because that's what Oliver Luck said. He goes, this isn't your cool Uncle Joe's XFL. For those of us that saw it, we went, well, this last time this whole thing happened, you guys kind of dropped the ball and did all this weird stuff with it. And, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of the way Bob Costas approached the whole thing, but he was right about something back then. And that is, it's not WWE enough for those fans, and it's not football enough for those fans. So what do? And the XFL this time around, to me, has really made this much more football-oriented style of play. And we did see football in this game. We saw some significant changes, obviously, with the kickoff. We saw some significant changes with the extra point attempt and how it works. And we saw some significant changes in camera angles. We saw significant changes in officiating. We saw how things were dealt with to make everything quicker, the game faster. Spotting the football was quicker. We saw the play clock change from 40 seconds to 25 seconds. We saw fewer ads. We saw a shorter football game. And when we look at the XFL as a whole and what it could potentially accomplish, what is the absolute objective, I think, when we watch the XFL? Because you can go to the comment section right now and see very vividly where some people are saying, look, man, this is no different than watching D2, and some of these guys are hoping to get a D1 scholarship, and it's probably never going to happen. But then there's the antithesis. And it's not just about the hunger for football. It is about seeing good, competitive football, which is what we all really want to watch. And my initial assessment of the XFL, one of the things that I talked about was, hey, look, I know that some people are going to talk about some of the plays that happened, but in week one in the NFL, it's really not a whole lot different. It's really not a whole lot different in week one in college football. After all, the Clemson Tigers did not look very good for a good majority of some of the football games that they were involved in, particularly week one or week two or some, even North Carolina later on in the season, right? But yet they ended up playing in a national championship. Now, can we compare amateur sports to professional sports? Yes and no. In the professional level, we expect everybody to be a cut above, do we not? We expect even a rookie quarterback in the NFL to be a cut above everybody else because he's in the NFL. He's a starting quarterback, whether it's with the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Oakland Raiders, or, hey, this guy's going to the New England Patriots. The very real reality of it is we expect it to be a different fiber of athlete because it's professional sports, and you're paid as such. Is this the G League of the NBA? Is that what the XFL is? I think the issue for me that I see is there's no clear-cut goal with the XFL. And all we see is the contrasted comparison from broadcasters and people that are involved in this of, hey, it could be just a second chance for a lot of guys who may see that next step to the NFL. That they are getting national television exposure, maybe in some ways that they didn't before, and now they have an opportunity to show what they can do in the professional level, and maybe they can get a contract in the NFL and really do something great, which I'm not going to say is a bad thing, but again, I feel like when you're watching professional sports and these people are being paid as professional athletes, because that's what they are now, you have to build them up as such. And so this constant circling around back to the NFL, I think, honestly, is really bad for the XFL. Because, again, it puts in the idea to the viewer that what you are about to see is just not quite as good, and we know that. But, hey, hopefully you're along for the ride and you just enjoy football enough that you're going to watch it regardless. You're just that damn hungry for football. It's the preseason all over again. That's really what you're saying. Hey, come watch the preseason because you just need football. And maybe it's too soon after the NFL. After all, we just got done watching the Super Bowl, the biggest game in the country. We just got done watching it. One of the biggest games in the world. I mean, you have people worldwide in the comment section going, I have never seen the NFL before, but I watched this game and I was entertained. And I'm going to hopefully be able to find ways to watch the NFL again. So it's one of the biggest games in the world. And I understand that you don't want to go after the NFL, that the USFL and the old XFL, and they made that mistake. But the AAF took a very similar route and decided, we're just not going to challenge the NFL. We're not going to do that. And the thing about it is you can't treat the viewer like we're unintelligent. Because ultimately we know that when you start a league, you want to be in the NFL's level. You want to be at the NBA's level. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You eventually want to create a product that is on that level. I mean, I've talked to David Rickles, who owns the EFC, who's been in Bellator for a long time. He's had more fights than anybody else in Bellator right now. He is their, quote, OG. And when I talked to him about EFC, he said that all he really wanted to be is a stomping ground, that they're producing next-level fighters, but it's still professional fighting. And the other guys that are involved in it have very different aspirations for the EFC, that one day they can definitely take it national and then maybe even bigger than that one day and go global. So when you start looking at the XFL and you start comparing it to other G leagues for baseball and basketball and, spring leagues and coming up leagues. You're putting it on national television. You're paying them a significant more amount of money than what most people are making in G League basketball or especially in baseball, right? I mean, even Tim Tebow was only making like $300 a game, and that's Tim Tebow. What is the ultimate goal for the XFL? And I think it needs to be clear. I think it needs to be stated and cut dry. And I think that the XFL needs to stop the backpedaling and just say, hey, look, we're a developmental league. Or they need to say, hey, look, we are a league that right now is kind of under the radar. Our talent level is a little bit different, but we hope to one day add more teams, add more games, have a big spring league, and at some point, maybe we can compete with the NFL. That's not the goal right now, but maybe 10 years from now, that could very well be the goal. And we're going to slowly try and work our way into the market. And I think with this whole fear thing that happens with these leagues that continuously try to come up, the NFL looks at it and goes, don't worry, you're not going to sustain. We're not scared of you. And part of the reason why we're not scared of you is because you won't give an objective, and all you talk about is how you're just not quite us. And we know you won't be us, and so we're not worried about you. And to me, that's sad for the players that are involved because they are giving it their everything, just like they would at any other game. Guys, I am Drew Duncan. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram is all at Drew Duncan Radio. You can find me on YouTube and Patreon by looking for Drew Duncan Radio. And do not forget that I am wherever you are listening to podcasts. And as always, don't you dare touch that dial.